I'm so thrilled to be introducing our very first speaker, Freda Player-Peters. She's going to talk to us about how, as women, we can stand out as leaders, even when surrounded by male leaders. I want to reiterate what Hope said about pinning Frida. We're all in this together, and sometimes if people are, jumping around, then she wouldn't stay on camera. So let me tell you a little bit about Frida before we get to hear her. And because we're an organization that's dedicated to higher education, I'm going to start with that. Frida graduated magna cum laude in political science from Fisk University. And while she was there, she was also the student government president. So she started her leadership as a top ranking leader on campus. And she went on and earned a master's in political management from George Washington University. Right now, Frida is the executive director of Emerge Tennessee. This is an organization that's inspiring women to run for office in Tennessee. And Frida is a co-founder. It's a significant organization because I think most of the scholars will remember last year, we had Andrea Dusteel speak. Andrea was the founder of Emerge America, and so Frida is the founder of Emerge Tennessee. Frida's career has many, many, many highlights. So, but I'm going to only share some of them because there's so many. But it's exciting to say that she started her professional career with the Al Gore 2000 presidential campaign. And she was lucky enough to attend 4 Democratic National Conventions, 2 as delegates, 1 for Barack Obama and 1 for Hillary. She spent 8 years as the political director of the Service Employees International Union. This is one of the most major US labor unions with 200 members. She was the political director. She was also a senior legislative advisor to Nashville's mayor, and that in that position, she was the second woman and the first African-American to hold that position. And then I just want to point out that she has served on many, 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 many prestigious committees as members and officers. She's chaired campaigns, founded councils, including an alumni association of her college. And right now, it's currently serving on the Metropolitan Nashville Public Schools Board of Education, which I know is an intense role, especially during COVID. And she's doing that while working full-time as the executive director of Emerge. So Hope, you want to put in a few words before we turn it over to Frida?
Of course. I want to mention that we want to make this time very special and memorable. So if you all can keep your cameras on, if you're comfortable and want to take a picture just to take a memory, if you all can smile or just say hi like this, so we can take a picture. That would be great.
Thanks, Hope.
Caroline will take the picture and will let us know if she got it.
I got it. Thanks, everyone.
Awesome.
Thank you. So to kick off, we're really honored to have Frida with us. Go, Frida.
Hi, everyone. It's an honor to be a part of this. I remember being the age when I was thinking about putting the speech and presentation together, kind of thought about that great time to be in college and how I really loved school. I kind of wish I could be in college for the rest of my life, but time and age would not allow that. But you're at a very special time in your life. And so to be able to talk to you is a great honor, just because you have literally the whole world at your hands to move about and to make change. And then also you have your whole life and your career to do. And there's so much opportunity that you have. And so I kind of focus this presentation on really like what would happen, like how do I talk to myself? If I can go back and talk to myself when I was at your age, I'm 42 right now. So, but if I can go back 20 years, what would I tell myself, learning some of the lessons that I've learned? And also, where I was. And I think at that time, I really want to know how to do stuff. So it's more and more of a little bit of a kind of a conversation, and feel free anytime to put a question in the chat. If you have anything that you need more explanation about or you need clarification, don't hesitate to put anything in the chat. And then we'll have Amanda read it out, and I'll answer it at the spot. But that was always kind of my thing, like, how do you do stuff? You know, my background, my parents grew up in rural Alabama. I was born and raised in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. My dad moved to Pennsylvania because of his job. So a lot of where you guys go to school in Gettysburg and Muhlenberg and all that stuff. I grew up in the Southwest Pennsylvania area. So I either looked at the colleges you're going to or applied to or had friends or classmates that went to the school that you went to. So yes, I have an affection for some of the schools that you're going to, especially for a liberal arts school, because it really, going to Fisk University and having a liberal arts education really changed my life and really helped become a big leader, just because the universality of a liberal arts education really helps into grounding your leadership and having universal knowledge of how to do different things. And so I'm excited. So this is going to be a conversation. It's not just me talking to you. So anytime, just throw in a question and hopefully we will have a good time and a good conversation. And hopefully we can make you guys great women leaders, which I know you guys have the innate talent and nurture to do. And I just can't wait to see you guys in the future doing great and awesome things. So I'm going to share my screen. All right. Can everyone see where we're at? Okay.
Yep.
So first, let's talk about the basics of leadership, because you're starting this leadership summit, and I was like, let's kind of start as a foundation. Like we all kind of can start and level set, make sure we're talking about things. So I'm going to talk a little bit about leadership, and then I'm going to about how to lead in a very male-dominated world, because whether you're in the United States, you saw some a little bit yesterday, confronting as a woman leader, being confronted by men, challenging your leadership, challenging your power, but then also where you're going to, you know, you're in very male-dominated cultures. And it's one of the things about being in the South. As you know, we're more of kind of a conservative area. And the same thing that happens in your home country is the same thing that still happens in the United States in the different regions, particularly coming from a very politically conservative area and a very religious conservative area. And so it's something about how do you navigate in those circles effectively, and keeping who you are and keeping your own essential and authentic person. So what is a leader? So let's start with that. So I want everyone to go into the chat and type in what you think is the definition of a leader, how you define leader. And the leadership has different names and different things, but let's kind of just get everyone's idea. So we'll go into the chat. I'm going to stop the share for a second. And then put in there, type in, how do you define a leader? What is a leader to you? So we have someone who inspires others, someone who can positively and effectively help others reach their goal. Those are two good answers. What else do we have in there? Person who listens with compassion, makes decisive decisions when needed. Great leader creates and inspires others. One who can direct and walk with others. Transparency and integrity, trustworthiness, help others become a leader. Oh, you guys have some good answers. Ooh, okay. Yay. Okay. Effective, positive change. A leader is someone who can, oh, wow, okay, so starting populating. Okay, help achieve goals, bring a team together. Great. Leader is someone who puts other needs in front of their own, is empathetic and willing and leverage others. Those see a problem and tackling to it, willing to serve and inspire other, create changes. Great. So we're actually going to lead to that. These are really good answers. And a lot of times, that's how we see leaders. And that's what ultimately our ultimate goal is going to be. Someone with good vision and character. Yes, I love these answers. Okay, we're going to go back to these, but these are kind of the foundations we look at leaders. And go back to sharing my screen again. Whoops, wrong one. There we go. And so, but the very simplest, we can go back to the very foundation of leaders. A leader is anyone who has a following. And I want to start with this first, particularly with the events that happened yesterday. As you encounter leadership and as you grow into your leadership, this is something that you need to learn, because you're going to encounter different types of leaders. And all the definition that you sent, That's the ultimate goal of a leader, and that's what we want. And we actually, yesterday was actually a good kind of a dichotomy of the kind of leadership, what it can do at its worst and what leadership can be at its best. And we saw the worst, unfortunately, we saw our president lead a mob to the Capitol, but then we also saw it best when we saw President Biden come to that. And you saw the president of France, and you saw Chancellor Merkel, sorry, it's a bit with her first name, talking about leading and rising up to the occasion, or Justin Trudeau rising to the occasion and saying, this is not what democracy looked like. And so you can see both sides at the simultaneous moment in time in these last literally 24 hours of what leadership can do on a good day and what leadership can do on a bad day. And even on a good day, you saw our nation come together. You saw the Speaker of a House, you saw a woman come together and say, we are going to help the Vice President and lead and not let this small sect of people derail our democracy. So it's one of the things that when you're a leader, you always have to pay attention who has a following, good or bad, because that's going to affect your leadership. So it's one of the things that I remember, I came into this definition when I was interviewing for my union job as a political director. And one of the first questions was how do you define a leader? And I gave a lot of the very same answers that you guys gave. And then the person who was interviewing was like, no, it's a person who just has a following. I was like, that's just so simplistic. But it's one of the things as I decided to go through my political career and I've seen, it's something that I realized when you come up with opposition, it's a person that has a following, whether they're on good side or bad side of the moral compass, they have a following. That's something you have to always be mindful of, particularly when you go back to your home countries and you deal with some very difficult situations. You always have to be mindful, who's the leader, whether they're a good moral leader or a good ethical leader. You always have to pay attention to this, but our ultimate goal always is to be that good leader that inspires others, helps others, that achieves change. Everything that we said in the chat, that's the ultimate goal, and then why we're doing what we're doing today. And then define leadership. So how do you define leadership? What's your definition? So how about we put in the chat, how do you define leadership in your eyes and in your minds? In your beautiful, beautiful minds. Okay, the actual ability to help others, encourage to roll. Leadership is creating change. Excellent. Taking initiative, the ability to influence others positively, the ability to influence those around you. Skills for leading positive change. Taking initiatives. Speaking truth, taking accountability, giving the right direction. All the potential that can help ourselves grow positively. These are great answers. Stepping up, paving a way for others. Leadership is a skill set a leader needs to create positive change. Facilitating a dream for a common goal. Help their team to personal growth, being the change, guiding the people you serve. The ability to impact others. Those are all good answers. And they all have a fundamental common theme. And it's how a leader leads. Everything you said was an active thing about having a skill set, inspiring others, teaching people. It's how that person leads. It's the actual. So you were describing the verb of that action step. So definite leadership is how someone leads. And it's different qualities. And we also usually look, when you look at leadership and qualities, you know, we always kind of look at, it says like how to be a leader. And you usually tell like what methods or what values or culture that you do to be. So that's how the basic foundation, and we're going to grow from that and build off of that. But that's kind of where we're going to start right now. Of we define a leader that anyone has a following, and we define leadership that is how a leader leads. So your leadership your path to leadership and your experience in leadership would not always be a straight line. You know, when I was in college, I wish I had this piece of paper and I wish I could find it. I've been searching my parents' house, my house. I can't find it. But I literally had a calendar of my life from like the year 2000 when I graduated from college to like the year, I think it was like 2050, and what I was going to do in my life and where I was going to be, and kind of, I'm going to achieve this, I'm going to have my law degree, and I'm going to run for office, and I'm going to do this. And then of course, about 5 years in, that whole lifelong plan blew up. And I totally took two totally different things. And I remember seeing this quote, and I remember that is so true. When you're a leader, when you come in, you have these great plans and dreams that you can accomplish and you will accomplish. But oftentimes, as we say, you keep living and life gets in the way. But it's always a good thing because life will take you on these great paths, and it's going to be a winding path. And your leadership, the way you get to leadership, and like even my personal experience in leadership, and my experiences were never in a straight line. It was one experience here, one individual experience here. And I will learn from each individual experience, and it grew into one big like wealth of knowledge. So it's one of the things too, like now that in your life, explore new things. Don't always think that it has to be one specific path, because opportunities are going to come up that you would never have thought of. And you're going to be like, this is a great opportunity, go for it. But you would never know it existed, because as you go and network with people from your own country, from people from different countries, people in the state, from your other classmates, from your professors, through this great program, you're going to network and meet people, and they're going to bring opportunities that you never knew existed. And those unique opportunities are going to force you to grow into a woman, as a leader, as a scholar, that you would never have known existed. I mean, that's one of the things I went to Fisk. I never thought that I would go to academic conferences and present papers, or even when I was student body president, you know, one of the jobs was I had to produce a homecoming week, an event. So I became an event planner. And, you know, when I think of being a poli-sci major, I'm thinking like, oh, I'm going to do policy. I'm going to create policy for students and change the cafeteria food and change the school budget. And like one of my biggest impact was creating a fun-filled week that was different than the past homecomings. And that was very successful and profitable, which served me in the future about how to network with people, how to engage, how to put on events, how to be effective. So you never know how you're going to gather that unique experience. And then also what's going to come. That's the one thing, that experience. So your leadership experience is going to be a collection of individual experience that will grow into one big wealth of knowledge. And it won't be the way you think about it, because it will come in very unique ways. And people are going to come and recruit you. They're going to come and seek you out. Or someone's like, you know, I heard this great, someone told me that you're a great person to do this, and I'm going to come to you because you were recommended by someone. So another part of leadership, you can lead from behind or from the side. And it's one of the things I've kind of learned in politics. And so like, just because you don't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And a lot of times, you know, my biggest lessons and the greatest things I've learned is either being beside another leader or literally being behind another leader and doing the work behind the scenes. So a lot of times when we think of leaders, we always think of the person who's in front of the microphone, in front of the TV, the head of the organization. But a lot of times the people who are really driving the change and really doing it are not always the one that's seen. Sometimes the most powerful person is not the person in the room. The person has the most influence may not always be in the room. But also be mindful that you always don't always have to be in the forefront to lead. You can always do it from behind, or you can do it from the side. So the topic of the day, how do you lead in a male-dominated world? So we set the foundation for being a leader. So when do men follow women? So I want to put in the chat, what do you think? I'm gonna stop sharing for a second. Type in, when do you think men follow women? Or when do you see an experience where a man has followed a woman? After they prove themselves, that's a good one. When men think women are more qualified, when women are strong and confident. Oh, good answers. Powerful and highly educated, when women have more power. Yep. When they're willing to concede that women have more experience than they do. Yes. And sometimes they concede and sometimes they don't. Men, sex equality. Well, they want to take their ideas as their own. Yes. When women are rich, yes, men always respect money.
It is the Republican Party. That's the problem.
Yes, yes, that's correct, Suzanne. When they're enlightened, yes, the enlightened. When they have strong mothers, yes, yes. Oh, great. I'm so glad we're on the same wavelength. Okay, I can't wait to get through the rest of my presentation. Okay, go back to sharing my screen. I love these answers. So when we've earned their respect, and I'll go a little bit into what does that look like and how you do that. When we teach them, you know, a lot of times, this is one thing I've learned. I'm really coming to see the fruition now, kind of being in politics and being in a community for 20 years, that the men who were my interns when I was in the state Democratic Party, or when I was working with SCIU, as they become in leadership positions, then they come back to me like, hey, Frida, I need your advice on this. Frida, how do I do this? Or Frida, I need you to partner with me on this project. That at a time when no other men was listening to them or following them, the fact that I either taught them what I knew, poured into them, had a conversation, they develop a loyalty to me because I took the time to do, because men are men and men are often threatened by younger men because they're ambitious and they don't want, you know, someone to succeed them. And so finding that opportunity to do that, you know, your investment will come to fruition a little bit later on. Whoops. When you beat them, this is one thing I learned being in politics, running campaigns. And also I've been an athlete. I played tennis. I still actively play tennis, but I played a bunch of sports when I was in middle school and high school. And I realized this, my husband is the oldest of 3 boys, you know, and just me and my sister. So there's also that all brothers and all sister dynamic. And I always kind of laugh at my husband, who always talks about sports and he loves action things and, you know, all about the Marvel universe and always about the fight scenes. I'm like, fighting is fun. You know, the action scenes, like it gets boring after like 2 minutes for me. I'm like, I'm ready to think about something else. But men have respect for one another. Like if you think about football, when the one team beats another, if you think of an undefeated team, the whole sports things, the whole thing about sports is beating one another. And men respect that. And when you show power and strength and they are feeling less than that, men respect that. It's one thing I learned from my husband, like when 5 years being married, like, why are you always concerned about how big a man is, like how tall they are and their weight? Because we as women, we don't think of size as anything. And like as a man, it's a fundamental, like primal instinct for them to say they're always sizing for another man's like, can I take you down if I either have to go to a fight? And so me being 5'4", my husband being only 6 feet, I kind of laugh at that because it's like, oh, how many men have beaten with my 5'4" self? And they're like 6 feet tall men. But in politics, when I got my respect is when I ran campaigns and beat men with either, especially with a woman candidate. And then they start to notice when you start winning, they start to notice, oh, I have to respect her. Like she's someone I need to keep my eye on, I need to follow with. Whoops. When you oppose them, this is one thing I also noticed, where if you're constantly fighting against the system and you're consistent with it, you opposing them, because sometimes it gets under their nerves, just because why? Because they think, you know, the world revolves around them sometimes. But when you oppose them, saying what is right, what is righteous, what is right by the community, what is right by the society, what's the morally right thing, particularly when you're challenging someone who wants to take advantage of the system, someone that constantly opposes them and you're righteous in it, they notice that because you're in the way of creating a smooth transition to whoever they want to get to. And they will eventually respect that. That goes back to the whole, going back to the, you know, do you beat them? They realize, because they've always opposing teams. If you think about the Yankees and the Red Sox and like all the rivals, it's who they're up against all the time. They've noticed that, and someone who's constantly doing it, and if you do it in a way that you're causing them to work for what they need, they will eventually follow that. That's one thing I learned. And then also speaking truth to power. I've noticed this being the only woman in the room. Perfect example, there was a meeting with some House leadership and a bunch of union lobbyists were coming together. And they're saying like, we're frustrated with the leadership because we're giving our dues money, we're investing into their campaigns, and we're not getting anything from it. They're not listening to our voice. They're not listening when we have concerns about what the issues they're talking about. They're not promoting our issues. And we're here fighting for the people, fighting for working people, doing the right thing. And I remember at one time we were at the meeting before the meeting, and the men were getting all blustery and saying, well, I'm mad at the party for doing this, and they're not listening to us, and this is her. And then we got into the room and they did a little bit of blustering, but no one got to the real issue. And I remember the leader at the party at the time were saying, well, we appreciate, do a little bit of patronizing, we appreciate your giving your money, and we do value unions in the thing. And, we just had a tough thing. And I remember interrupting him. I was like, stop, Mike. Like, the problem is we lost these races, and you had $80,000 in a race, and we had a woman who lost by 150 votes. If you just took $20,000 and put it into her campaign, she would have won her campaign. And the guy just stopped. And all the men were just like, I'm just looking around like, why are we talking about? Like, that's the fundamental thing. We're giving you tens of thousands of dollars to expect you to use it in an effective way, and you're not doing it. You're giving all these excuses, and here's a concrete example of how you messed up and why that's wrong. And that money is coming from people who make $10 an hour. We have to raise that money. We have to work for their money. That's the union members' money. And the union members who are doing it are giving up something to make a better goal. And you're taking advantage of that. And that's the fundamental problem we have. And none of the men could say that. And I was like flabbergasted. I'm like, these are men who are twice my age and who are doing all this flustering. But when it came down to it, they couldn't do it. And they're all like, Frida, oh, you told them what to do. I was like, well, that was your job. Like, I'm the youngest girl in the room. So one of the things is when you speak truth to power, men respect that because they say that, but oftentimes men are more scared than they let on to be. But they also present it by being blustery and being very manly. But as women, that's something that we can do well. What do men respect? So one of the things I've noticed that men that respect results, and this is go back when you beat them. I noticed when I was running the union campaign, and we ran 2 candidates against the school board members and the chair of the school board. And the campaigns I ran defeated the existing current sitting chair of the school board. And I did that 2 cycles in a row. And after I did that, then I realized people kept on calling me. And I was just like, why are people coming to me? And I realized it's because I was producing results. Hard work. Men respect work. That's something that gives them their value. And when they see it in someone else, they respect that. So working hard, keeping our virtues. You guys don't have a workshop talking about this. So this is one of the things of, pay attention. What are your virtues? This is a great time in life to define that. Read, experience, talk to other people. Define what are your fundamental virtues. And your virtues are going to change and evolve as you have life lessons and you just live life and you have ups and downs and you have specific experience. But you guys are coming from particular experiences from your home countries. So you will have experience in with this. And so one of the things of when you go through life, start defining yourself. What are key virtues for you? And then how you present and staying fast to that would do it. That's one of the things that I've noticed now that I'm firmly into my career. One thing that people consistently said about Frida, Frida, you always stuck by your values. You always knew what you stood by, and we always knew why you stood by them. And they said, well, I've always respected that because I knew that you weren't doing it just to be politically ambitious, or you weren't doing it because of political. You always had a value to do that, and we always knew where you stand. Persistence. It goes back to Mitch McConnell saying on the flash floor, nevertheless, she persisted. And it's one of those things. They may not like you for it, but they respect you for it because you keep going. And that goes back to a little bit of that actually working hard and beating them and opposing them, that persistence. Because a lot of times men in power will try to outweight you. They're like, if I wait 3 months, if I wait 6 months, if I wait a year, they'll go away. They'll just go by and I can just outweight them because I don't need this goal, what I'm doing right now. But if you're persistent and they know that you will never go away, that means they have to deal with you, that they have to be, that you're a force of nature. Courage. Can you speak up? Men respect power. I mean, if you look at our current president right now, men did not have the courage to speak up. And that's what happened yesterday happened because man after man would not speak truth to power. And having the courage to say, what the president doing is wrong. What the president is doing is against our fundamental democracy. And so having courage in doing that and be able to do it now, and it's scary. I mean, there's been times I've spoken up, when I spoke up, you know, in front of other politicians, my knees were literally shaking. My ankles were shaking. I'm in my little stiletto heels, like, you know, hoping that I don't fall over, holding to the podium. And it's not always easy, but when you do it, you feel better and people would always respect you for it. I remember this past year talking about being on the school board. We were trying to figure out whether to go virtual school or not. And we were getting a lot of pressure from parents, keep school open, but we knew with the pandemic, people could die. And I remember my school board, other school board members were talking, and finance said, like, hey, we are elected officials. We ran to make the hard decisions, and now it's time to make that hard decision. And so I'm going to put a line in the sand and say that we need to be virtual. And I remember getting texts right after I said that, particularly from men, about, oh, Frida, I'm glad you said that. You said, and I was just like, wow. And I didn't think something like that, but the response that I got from other elected officials were really great. I'm going to go to the next thing. I'm going to go into the questions in the chat. And then know your stuff. This is the one thing, if you know your information and you know you're right, and you'll constantly be proving that you're right, men will respect that and they'll come to you for you being the expert. And this is a great time. You can get to know your stuff, by reading and also observing. A lot of stuff that I know right now in politics is just me sitting in the room and observing. So I'm going to go to the chat now and there's a couple of questions.
Yeah, Frida,
Yes.
I can jump in real fast
Great.
and throw them out to you. You know, so a lot of, yes, it's important that we have the courage to speak truth to power, and that's a lot easier to do when you already have some power. Can you talk a little bit about how you find that courage when you aren't the most senior person in the room and when you don't already have the power?
What do you have to lose? So for me, it was what I had to lose. And it's hard because when you don't have power, you think you have something to lose because you feel like you're going to lose a little bit of access. But it's really kind of thinking about, if I don't say something, what would happen? And then having that support, having that one person to give you encouragement to do it. The first time when I had to give a speech, it was a very scathing speech to the school board about they laid off a bunch of custodians. And I had to tell them that they were basically worthless. And that was literally the thing, but it was talking about, and it was worthless in a part of they did not have the worth of morals and values. So when they laid people off, what you were doing, putting more people in poverty. And so you were bringing a level, and I wish I had the speech because a friend of mine wrote it. And it was just like, you're losing the worth of people. And I remember that's the speech I was talking about, like literally my legs were like shaking. I'm holding onto the panel because I wasn't, at this point, I wasn't Frida elected official. I was just Frida coming in new as a new lobbyist saying this. And I had a friend like, Frida, you can do this. You are speaking for people who do not have a voice, who don't have any level or any platform, just even have the access to stand in front of someone to do it. And so when you don't have the power or the position, it's finding that one person to help stand by you to do it and say, if you don't do it, no one else will. And you're not speaking up for you, you're speaking up for somebody else, and realize you're really just being a conduit. And that's where you get the courage of throwing, like, you're doing it for invisible people that you really can't see. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. And you're moving the ball maybe a centimeter, maybe an inch, maybe 3 feet. And so when you do it, it's a test of growth to do it. And it's hard. Like I don't like confrontation, you know, but it's hard to do. But when you do it, there's a release, and you don't realize that until you kind of just, when you have that first step. But it's finding that person, that one person that can walk with you, that can help speak the positive energy to make sure you have it.
What about vulnerability? So do you feel that women always have to appear tough, or is it okay to show vulnerability in a male-dominated workspace? And then,
yes. Okay,
go for it. Go for it.
Yes, and it's when and how. You can't always do it because you have to be mindful of the people in the room and the men in the room. When you do it, there's strength in Brene Brown talks about the strength and vulnerability, and that's not infinite. But you also have to be careful when you're vulnerable, because you also don't want people to take that vulnerability and to do it. So you got to know the room, and you got to learn how to read the room. And that's a hard thing to do, but knowing when to do it, but I really realized vulnerability helps when you do the grassroots, when you're talking to other women, where you're building the energy and the people for the movement. That's when the vulnerability, when you're connecting people to help people to come to follow you or follow the organization, is when vulnerability works the best. But it does work. I remember I was in a meeting and it was this big thing that we're going to do this big healthcare policy, and everyone was a little first, like, because we're about to shut down the public sector hospital here, the public safety hospital, and they were going to do it, and somebody was trying to ram their agenda, and people want to stop this agenda from going. And I remember I stopped and be like, you know what? I'm going to check in right now. I feel a little weird because I don't know how we're going to do this policy to save this public hospital in 90 days. And I need some reassurance that this is going to happen, how it's going to happen, because I don't see it happening and I feel weird and nervous about it. And as soon as I said that, elected officials, and here I'm just a lobbyist, elected officials, we had CEOs, and everyone started chiming in and saying, I agree the same way. I agree the same way. So there's a way to be vulnerable without truly exposing all your emotional feelings, but saying, hey, I don't feel right about this, so you have to help walk me through it. And it put the onus of the people who are trying to drive the agenda to defend their agenda. And then it brought down their agenda of what they was trying to railroad and close down this public safety hospital. So there's times where you can do it, and not having the most power of the room gives you the freedom to do it, and actually gives you more power at the end, because you're doing something that the powerful people can't do. Powerful people can't always show vulnerability, but you having the less amount of power actually give you the most amount of power, because you have the ability to be vulnerable because you have nothing to lose. And that's one of the beauty of being a young leader, that you can put more out there because you don't feel like you're going to lose anything. And at the end of the day, you end up making more progress because you get to say the things other people can't. And then you realize, and they start following you because you become their voice by default.
Thank you. The questions keep pouring in. Are you okay if we do a few more? Or how are you feeling about timing?
How much time do you have left?
We have about 30 minutes.
Let's do 2 more, and then I can go on.
Okay. What's your opinion on women having to constantly prove themselves in order to be worthy of respect? Why can't women be enough just as they are?
That's a very good question, because it never stops. And I would say, as you move on to your leadership experience, you still have to prove yourself, but the advantage is that you prove yourself less, but it still always happens as you grow into your leadership role, as you get more power. There's always going to be one person more powerful than you are in the room in some shape, form, or fashion, whether they're influenced by the bigger, the person that you may not see in the room. But that's the important part of being in a male-dominated society. And women, sometimes either are the women believing that, you don't deserve to be there, or you're fighting with, with who has that one seat at the table, unfortunately. And sometimes it's just men believing that inherently, because this world teaches men that they are the leaders, they are the ones, and you're constantly fighting that thought process, that paradigm process. And until I think, we really get to a place where women collectively have more collective power, we'll get to fight out. And we're getting there. We're slowly getting there, as we're kind of getting into the second and third generation of women working in the workplace, and men seeing their mothers be powerful women, that it's not a foreign nature where they see the clash of the kind of the sexes in their own home, at least in the States. And I know it's a little different in some of your home countries, but because you don't have women actually working in the same career field as you do here in the States. But we're slowly getting there. But it's just the natural part where we cater to the world where our natural, when you think of a leader, then if you close your eyes and get the next thing, it's always a man. Like the president of the United States has always been like 6 feet tall. Like it's one of those things that's just a natural kind of gut thing that we as a nation has not, and as a world has not always challenged that initial reaction, that initial bias. And it's one of those things that it's getting less and less because of the women who came before us 10, 15, 20, 100 years ago. But unfortunately, I think we're about 2 or 3 generations away where women will be seen as being women And just because it's a paradigm shift that we're constantly fighting until, and I hate to say, and it sounds a little cruel, but till some generations die off and we have new generations coming up in this new world order is when we keep on to fighting that.
And we are going to have more time at the end of the session for some more Q&A. So I'll just do one more and then maybe we'll hold the rest for the end.
Okay, great.
Chanel Henrys is curious, and you talked a little bit about this, but how you can find your seat at the table to speak your truth to power. How do you get in the room?
There's different ways to do that. I'll touch about this going a little forward, but this is where asking for experiences, asking for opportunities, volunteering for opportunities, and doing the hard work, and being persistent and learning your stuff. People eventually come to you for help. And when you come for help and when you produce, that helps you get to the seat at the table because they realize you bring something to the table. And so that goes back to knowing your stuff and the hard work of once you know something, that's something that no one can take away from you. And when you have that education, that knowledge, and that experience, people can realize you bring that value. And once people bring that value, they want the table because inherently people work hard, but we also want the most efficient way. And sometimes we're just, as humans, a little lazy. And so we know someone that can bring that information, that talent with us, so they want you at the table because, you know, many hands make light work. And so that's how you bring yourself to the table, by constantly being persistent, as in showing up. And then that hard work. I mean, that's one of the things that's taught at the Democratic Convention. When I was staffing it, you know, I didn't go out and party with my friends. We're all like 20-year-olds, and, you know, it's like there was open bars and stuff, and my friends were going out and partying, and I didn't. I like came home early, and it sucked sometimes because you're going to these great, wonderful events, and you're seeing these political celebrities and TV celebrities. But I had to be ready at 6 o'clock in the morning for the delegate breakfast. And my boss said, you know, Frida was the only person that always showed up when we asked her to. And come 10 years later, anytime I've asked them to help do a fundraising training for Emerge, or I've asked them for money for my campaign or money to support things, he's always showing up, because 10, 15 years ago, when I was 23, 24 years old, and I always showed up and I worked hard, he respected that and he valued that. And so anytime I came back and asked for him or asked for something, he would always be there for me. And I always said, Frida's someone you need to have. And when he came for a reference, he was just like, this is why Frida needs to be in that job, or this is why Frida's important for that position, because she always worked hard, she's always showed up, and she always knew what she was doing, or she was willing to learn something new. And so that's how you get to the seat at the table.
That makes a lot of sense. Show up.
Yes.
Put yourself there.
They have a life of showing up. That is so true. So what hurdles are going to face when leading with men? And so this is something that I felt that sometimes we as women don't always talk about in public. Sometimes we talk about in those one-on-one meetings, but something that I realized, like when I was going back to my 20s, like what was the hurdles that I faced when working in a male-dominated role, particularly in politics? It's changed a lot. When I first came in around 2000, it was very kind of male-dominated. Women were making more of a presence, but men were often the ones of leadership. Something that we don't talk about is the pretty privileged. And I noticed this when I was working for a Democratic Party. There, particularly some of the women, you know, they're very beautiful women who always got the attention of the men. And when I first saw this, and I was just like, why am I getting those? Goes back, having seen at the table. Well, why am I getting a chance to go to that event? Or why can't I just go? Because they always want to go with the pretty girl. And I'll be honest, I was jealous because they had access to power and access to different leadership, or they were taken off to different events and different opportunities. And what I realized after I got to know that staff person, realized as a woman, what tough position she was in, because she always had to deal with this, that no one took her seriously because she was pretty. And then as someone who wasn't kind of deemed in the traditional sense of beauty, I felt like I was constantly competing against this. And I realized, oh, we're fighting the same battle of men being men, and men not giving the same access because they want to sit next to her because she's pretty to look at. And she's getting certain experiences that I had, but realizing some of the experiences for her weren't some of the best ones, but always men giving attention to the person that may look nice in the room, not realizing they might have been the most productive part. and succeeding, how do you succeed to give yourself the attention and the energy that you need to do the right thing? And that's where that hard work comes in, proving to the thing that at the end of the day, they're going to see so much. But when it came to stuff being responsible and gave something, they always came to me. And then even for her, I always felt for her too, because then she wasn't given the responsibility because they thought, oh, you're the pretty little girl, so we're just gonna let you sit there and look pretty. And not giving the things and not realizing she was being cheated out of experience too. So it's something that we don't always talk about as women. That's always kind of lurking in the background. That's not fair because men are men and sometimes they use that. And it's something to be mindful of, that's not always relevant, but especially after you graduate from college, that you're going to run into this, particularly as the society deems beauty and what they look at beauty and unreal expectations we have of women. Harassment. Unfortunately, when you deal with men in power, you're going to be harassed. And I hate that this is one of the factors, but learning how to deal with it. It's important to document it. If you can't report it, if it's safe, report it. If you can't, talk about it and talk about other women, because a lot of times you're not the only one. And if we're going to push back on the patriarchy, push back on the dominance, that when men are intimidated, they use their power, what is inherent as a man versus a female, where they use their position. And some of the power is not always sexual, but straight up. If you looked yesterday at the joint hearing, when Nancy Pelosi said, we need some of the members to leave the floor to observe social distance because we're in a pandemic, the very first thing you saw was a male go to the podium and sarcastic say, well, what do you do about parliamentary inquiries? How are you supposed to do that if we can't talk? And it was a direct harassment, it was a direct pushback on her power, saying, how are you, Speaker of the House, going to tell me as a man whether I can be on the floor or not? And it's literally about their safety. She's really trying to put them in front of themselves, keep them safe out of harm's way. But just because a woman was telling a man no, their natural inclination was, I'm going to push back and harass you. And we see this a lot, and it's something that we always have to be prepared for to do. Now, I know there's a couple questions. I know I'm kind of bouncing up some questions, and I'll finish the slide and we can go to things dismissed. And it goes back to some of the people saying, have taken your ideas and then using it as their own. That's how they feel their power, that I push you to the side, it makes me more powerful, so I'm just going to dismiss you. Or if they're intimidated by you and they know that if I give you attention, it gets less attention on me, less power on me. So it's some of the things that they're always going to try to dismiss you, particularly when you start being successful and you're a threat to their power. They're going to try to dismiss it because they'll give them more of a power and a stance, knowing that they have their eye on you because they realize how much power you have. And then also being a token, because then they want you to room because they want to see as they're the good guy. I have a woman in the room, and see, I'm just the good guy who believes in morals and believes in equality, and they never take your ideas seriously. And the thing about being a token, that you always want to try to avoid it when you can. Sometimes you can't, and sometimes you don't know you're a token until you're halfway through the situation. But always use that opportunity to go back to learn and to observe how the men are acting. Observe how the men are acting, like learning how to read a room. One of the things, sometimes being quiet in the room and observing gives you the most power, because you see things that people miss. I've seen that when it goes leading from the side or leading from behind. There's been times where I've sat in a room and not said a word, and then going back to my male boss and was like, did you see how that person reacted when you made that comment? Did you see their body language? They did not like that. Or someone's on our side because when you said this, they smiled, they smirked, they winked, they had a positive reaction. So sometimes when you're that woman and they're thinking, well, we just want you in the room to show that we are the good guy, you can use it as a learning lesson. And then also find that perfect moment, and find that moment where then you could speak up, and then you use that opportunity where they thought you were a token to actually speak truth to power and have that courage. Where they think that something. So there's times where you can take advantage of that, of something that's negative, and flip it on its head to a positive. I see a bunch of things going on in the chat. I don't know if there's a question there, Amanda, or not. Or
I think it's a lot of snaps. People saying, okay, yes, that's
good.
Their experience.
All right. So take advantage of your youth. You are at a great time in life. There's a few things I can go back in life and change. One of the things I would travel the world more. But take a little bit more advantage of your youth. Ask a man to be an advisor, but not a mentor. But this is one of the things that I learned throughout my 20s. I've always had a man who is willing to share their knowledge, because men have egos. And with their egos, they want to feel important. And men love to share and teach because then they feel like they're the center of the room and they're center of the universe. Take advantage of that as a woman. Take advantage of you being young, you being in your 20s and being a sponge and ask the questions because men feel important and powerful. But what you're getting is learning how men think, how they strategize, their goals. You're using it as a collection of intelligence, a collection of information that you can store that you use for your rest of life. So ask them to be an advisor because sometimes, particularly like the meeting before the meeting or the meeting after the meeting, they can tell you what's going on that you may not see as a woman. Or I've had men be very honest, like Frida, yeah, like they're doing this just because it's their ego and they're just doing it just because they have a grudge match against another man. They don't care about this issue, or they do care about this issue and this is why. So sometimes they can tell you the conversation that men will have amongst each other that they will not say with the woman in the room. Play the long game. This is something I didn't realize until my late 20s when I felt like people were moving faster or getting ahead more than I was. And I realized by the time I got to my mid 30s that I was like kind of the tortoise and the hare kind of scenario, that I was ultimately succeeding them and being more powerful and they were going to. So a lot of times it may not feel compared to some of your peers, particularly your male peers, because you'll see like they'll get a short boost because there's a young scrappy male and then some man will want to take them in and be like, look at my protege. And then you kind of get this in the background. But then I want us, those very men who were kind of, who were brought in to be the young protege, either end up burning out, end up to realize they were just mediocre men who didn't have much talent and couldn't produce anything if they had tried to and they paid for it. And then realize I was proving myself and I'd be successful and that ended up becoming more powerful than they were in the long run. So sometimes it's hard in your 20s to think, because you see people moving, you see the chess piece moving and things like that. You have advantage of time on your side in your 20s. So, and time goes by fast. So think about how your high school years went by so fast, or those who were seniors in college. Think about when you were a freshman and how at times when you're a freshman, your sophomore year, you feel like I am never going to graduate. I'm never going to become an upperclassman. And then you become an upperclassman and you're like, oh my gosh, where did time went? So a lot of times it's like long hours, but short years. Play the long game with that, because the leadership, it really matters on the long term because you want consistency. You don't want to be kind of a firework where you have this great flash and then you have no longevity, because real power ends as being consistent and it goes for a long time. Use your ambition. We as women are taught not to be ambitious, but use it as a drive to do so. This is a perfect example. When I worked on the Gore campaign, actually, I started out as an intern, and during the day, because I did not come from a wealthy family, I worked as a secretary. Well, we called them .coms back then, but it would be equivalent to an internet startup. I worked as a secretary for an internet startup from 9 to 5, and then from 6 to 9 o'clock, I interned for the Gore presidential campaign. And then from that internship, they actually hired me to be a full-time staffer. And that was part of my ambition, that I had to do something I didn't want to do to pay the bills and to pay the rent. And then I worked for free as an intern. The internship wasn't paid. But me being committed to having a career in politics, saying, okay, this is when I can intern, this is when I put my 20 hours in, it translated to that. So you can use your ambitions to be that drive. And then take advantage of your womanhood, of being a woman. Lead through your emotions. I think someone asked about the vulnerability. Lead through your emotions and know when to use them. And that's the trick as a woman, is know when to use your emotions. Because nowadays, leadership is about authenticity and being your true self. I mean, even in the Trump world and amongst the Trump followers, the reason Trump has a thing, because a lot of the people who Trump follows, they feel like the establishment, the elite has left them behind, and the elite looks down on them. That's the whole thing about Hillary and the deplorables. They felt like, oh, that's Hillary just being a snob and looking down on us. And it wasn't a thing about, no, it's just about your character. It's not about who you are, your station in life. And so Trump brought an authenticity to leadership that people gravitate to, as in these establishment, even as a rich white guy, they're rejecting me. And so they're rejecting you. And him being authentic in that feeling of being rejected by the establishment gave him a following. And that's how he used that anger, that emotion to lead with. Not that it's a good thing, but that's an example of like the antithesis. But if you look at the opposite of Barack Obama, or even Biden, or even Kamala Harris, them using, especially Biden, I think Biden's be a better example. They'd be like, he's empathetic, he understands loss, he understands death, to lose that family member. And he was able to lead through that emotion, particularly during this sensitive time of when people are dying of COVID. He understands that loss of someone losing their parent to something because he lost a child. And that's how it gives him credibility. Like, I understand how I need to lead this nation because the policies that we do are literally life and death. Listen to your body. And it goes back to that courage question. Like, when do you speak truth to courage? When you don't have the power, your body's telling you have the power. Like, so when I know when I'm supposed to say something I don't want to do, I literally get a little sweaty. My armpits get a little, like make sure I have the strong deodorant. But my stomach, I get butterflies in my stomach. I start breathing heavy. And when I get to that point, I realize, Frida, you need to say what you're thinking. And 9 out of 10 times when I say it, someone comes up to me and is like, Frida, thank you for saying it because I was thinking the same thing. Or Frida, I'm glad you said it because I couldn't articulate what I was feeling, but you did it. So a lot of times we as women, we have a natural intuition and use that. Men don't have that. And I've seen it time and time again with the women leaders I've worked with. They're just like, something's not right. Something's not right. Something's not right. And then we go back to it. Oh, there it is. It will pop up. So that's something that men initially don't have, that we actually has as women. So take advantage of that because that will help you stop pitfalls. Own and ignore your gender. And you're right, like, Frida, what the heck are you saying right now? Because they're two opposites. So know when to know when you use your woman, being a woman, and how to do that. We're natural caregivers. Like right now in my life, I'm a caregiver of my 72-year-old mother. I don't have children, but I have friends in my own age who have children. So I really can relate to being in part of that sandwich situation. When I look at policies, I look at how does it affect my 72-year-old mother, who I'm helping taking care of, who has health issues. Me as being that caregiver, how does it affect me? But then also me being an auntie and being a surrogate mother to my friends' kids, how's that end up being a child giver? And how's that policy, is it really practical? I mean, it goes back to the stimulus check of $600. $600 doesn't pay for healthcare. I mean, childcare for someone's child, if you're having kids, or $600 doesn't pay for my mom's rent for her senior apartment living, or $600 doesn't pay for my rent. So we all lost our jobs. What does that do? And a lot of times men don't think that because men are the primary caregiver. We're making 70 cents to their dollar. They're making all the money. So like, oh, $600 will help towards a bill. And you're like, but the men don't write the bills. They don't write the checks. And we are the economic drivers. But then also ignore your gender. Like, men get turned off when you always playing the feminist card. And I've seen this with some of my diehard feminist friends. And I was just like, you can be a feminist and speak through your actions, but not always through your words, because that will turn men off and they don't listen to what the words of wisdom you have. So you also know when to play the woman card, but when to step back and say, hey, I'm here on my own methods, my own merits. I'm an expert in my own field. My gender has nothing to do with my expertise. I know my stuff, whether I'm a man or a woman. But then as a woman, you can talk about how does it implement on a day-to-day basis? How am I a better mother, a better teacher, a better single woman, whatever it is, how do I bring that to the picture? I'm going to pause right there. I'm going to do the treasure hunt and then I'll finish up. Do you have any questions or?
We have a few, but I think we can save them for the end because they were related to things earlier in the presentation.
Okay, great. So treasure hunt. So now you're in your 20s and you're exploring who you are and get to know who you are. I want to give you a treasure hunt as you move through the next decade of your life. Find your tribe. You're at a great time in life that the friends that you're going to make in college are going to be your lifelong friends. I wish I kept up with some of my high school friends as much as I did my college friends. But during this pandemic, the people I talked to, the people I went to college with, we make Zoom calls and we had, our little friends Thanksgiving and stuff like that. So find your tribe, find the people that's going to protect you, find the people that are going to encourage you. This is the time to do it because you're going through this great age where you're becoming a woman and you're becoming your own and you're defining who you are. And you don't have the burdens of like, I love my mama to death, but she sees me as the 13-year-old Frida sometimes, even at 42. But your friends see you who you are and who you're growing to be, that sometimes your friends in your home country or the friends you grew up do not see the person you're involved in. So right now, this is a great time to help nurture the people that you want to be and having that support, that people that support your passion. Because my friends who are like mathematic majors and science majors, like, Frida, we always going to be in politics. So I ran for office. They're like, Frida, I want to give you $200 because we remember when you're in college and you were student body president, how politics was important to you. Find one good man. And this is, I know it's kind of counterintuitive being a woman, like why we're like male dominated world, but there are really good men out there, as we said earlier about, what men respect. And one of people said being raised by a strong woman. There are good men out there who want to see women succeed, who support women because they were raised by a single mother, or they realize the sacrifices their mothers made, and they want to see that. Or more importantly, they have daughters or going to have daughters. And once they have daughters, they realize how men can be men and they want a better world for their daughter. And so they will give you like the secrets, unlock little tidbits of what the men in the room are thinking. What, like, perfect example. When I was working at the Democratic Party, initially we all made the same amount of salary, but then we had a bonus. And then my boss at the time made this complicated bonus system where I got the less amount of bonus money, but the white men got the largest amount of bonus money. And I never knew it happened. I assumed we all got the same amount of bonus because we're all on the same level, senior level in politics and senior level in the organization. I actually had more education than any of the two white men that were there. And they got more money than I did. I never knew until that one good man in my office, like, hey, Frida, like, you don't know this, but I think you should need to know this. You're getting, your bonus is like several $100s less than the men in the room. And so you need to know that, so you know when to challenge the system and ask what you're worth. And sometimes it takes a man to realize to know what's going on, just because as you being a woman, you're locked out of the room. So sometimes there's always one good man who either the men are ignoring and they hate that and they resent that. And so they want to ally also. Use that to the advantage so you know what's going on behind the scenes. Find your outlet for self-care. And I know this is probably, I think, another workshop that's going to happen later on. Tennis was always my outlet. It was athletic. I get to move. I was around a bunch of women. I played in an all women's league. So it's just nice just to be around women and things like that. So find your outlet, learn that early on, because as you grow into power and grow into your leadership, it can be exhausting and you do not want to burn out. And men are sometimes expecting you to burn out. So find that place where you can take care of yourself. You can renourish yourself so you can be that great, strong leader. And as you bring other leaders up, you're going to need some place that you can replenish yourself so you can pour into other women who are coming behind you to do it. Find your boundaries. This goes back a little bit to the harassment part. And then also just knowing what you can do so people don't also exploit you, because you are a woman and expect the woman to always carry the load. Know when to say, be able to say no, but it's saying, this is what I'm good at. And then you get more respect. I mean, that's one thing I know, I'm known as a budget expert in the school board because of my experience with the national state government. But then people are like saying, well, you're on the school board, you should know all these academics. I'm like, I'm not an academic expert. I understand academics, but I can't tell you what curriculum and what method behind that curriculum is going to work, because that's not my expertise. My boundaries within, how to work a budget and how to work the system. And I want to create that system efficient. So my other colleagues on the board who are teachers and educators by trade can come in and be able to do that, set the ultimate background for that academic part. But I just found the financial resources for them to succeed in their talents. Find your voice of no. No is a complete sentence. And knowing that you're not spreading yourself too thin and then you're not being successful, but be able to say no is a powerful thing. And it's a way to stop bad things from happening. I mean, we see that right now with Trump. The women are saying no, but the men aren't. And this is what we're asking. So to be able to say no is also an act of resistance, is an act of defiance. And to be able to say no and be able to stop something is just as powerful as to be able to create something. And sometimes you have to say no so I'll be able to create something. I mean, I know Barb was talking about the things that I've helped co-founded. And part of the reasons I was able to do that because I said no to other things and put my focus into one or two things that this is what my energy is going to do. I can't do everything and be everything to everyone, but I'm going to start this one part and then move. And so I had to learn my boundary, learn how to say no to other things, just because if I'm going to do something and do something well, I have to be focused on it. And then find your will. I mean, especially as you go back to your home countries and you're going to deal with some very tough situations, you got to find the why to do that, to keep persevering and keep pushing will. I mean, keep pushing through, and your will is going to be able to do that. And that's something they can't take away. When you do, like when I founded a lot of the organizations, we had no money. Like I'm literally a 25, 26-year-old kid starting an alumni association, and we're literally just asking for 10, 20 bucks here. Like we didn't, no one wrote us a big $1,000 check or a $10,000 check. Every organization I started, from Emerge to this, to like the Wake, we literally had no money. We had to raise the money. So I had to go out there and ask for money. And a lot of it was done by a lot of hard work and giving up my time, and my time was my resource. But it was about 5 of us who started Emerge Tennessee, and I gave up a lot of weekends to do it. And from those 5 women, we've trained over 125 women in 3 years to run for office. And we had 25 women elected to office. The first Nigerian woman to be elected in the country to a public office came from Nashville. The first woman to be a public defender in Nashville was a woman. The first Democrat to be elected in a rural town in Upper East Tennessee, all came from these 5 women saying that we don't have a lot of money, but we have time and we have knowledge and we're going to do it. And that's what something that we'll start. And we just did it by will, because we're like, the men aren't going to do it. And we're tired of these men doing stuff and doing it a mediocre way, when women has the talent and the ability to do it. And we're just going to go out there and we're just going to spend our time and energy and our knowledge to start it. And so you're also part of a legacy of a movement, you know, the suffrage movement, the civil rights movement, the labor movement, healthcare, you know, running for office. You know, I ran for office, first time I ran for office, I was 27 years old. I lost, but running for office put me on the map where people started knowing, it's like, Frida, you're a smart woman. Like, we need to engage you more. And that was actually the biggest jump for my career, is running for office. Even though I was 27, at that point, I can tell you, every year someone asks, Frida, when are you going to run again? Frida, you're going to run again. And so even running at the young age of 27 showed the legacy of women were like, you got to run for office again. You were young, the situation wasn't great, but you show your smarts, you show your ability, you show that you do it. So some woman has done what you have, done it in a worse situation, under worse conditions, and they survived and they succeeded. And so even though you're going to have some tough challenges and some tough things, you can do it because a woman before you did it, and just as bad as situations. And it's mostly women. Sometimes, you know, the civil rights movement, you see Martin Luther King, you see some, you know, Malcolm X or John Lewis. I guarantee you there's at least 5 or 6 women who are doing the hard work behind it to make that happen. Healthcare, you know, it's women who said, I want to take care of my child, or as a woman, I need this type of healthcare to make sure I'm healthy to be the leader that I need to be. So I need to worry about my reproductive health and whether I'm healthy to bear a baby, or I'm losing babies because I'm not healthy enough to sustain my body because I'm not having the healthcare needs. And men need babies to make more men. Like, you know, we don't have the right healthcare, the race does not happen. The human race does not succeed. And so we're saying, if you want more male babies in the world, you got to take care of me. And we as women be able to say that, saying like, this is why healthcare reform is important, because I have to be healthy to bring another male in the war. That was women saying that. And women constantly saying that realize, you know, not be able to bring babies to term, and men realizing, oh, why is it happening? Because like, you're not giving me access to healthcare that I need. Like, that's part of the conversations we're having the scenes to push the things. So never doubt a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens to change the world, because indeed that was the only thing that ever has. And so that's one thing I have learned, especially through Emerge, that it takes a small group of women. And when I see women run for office and run for office in their hometown, it's usually them and their best friend just pounding it out day after day, making phone call after phone call, knocking door after door, raising, you know, $10, $50 from here and there. And then they end up winning. And then they all of a sudden they have a platform. But I tell women when we train them to run for office, like, when you run, you're only gonna have 3 or 4 people that are really by your side through your whole time. You're not gonna have these great big, you know, rooms of headquarters and thousands of people helping you that we see on TV. It's always been a small group of women and always been a small group of people. And so the way you start to change the world, it's just 1 or 2 of you having the will and the courage to do it and pushing through. So question time.
Yay, we have about 8 minutes or so for questions. No, it's fine. We've been taking them throughout. I think it's great. To kick it off, Michelle is curious if there's a time that you were pressured to go against your virtues. You know, you talked a lot about standing in your values, and if so, how you handled that.
Yes, I'm trying to think of something very specific. Yes, particularly in politics. Oh, I can tell you when I ran for office the first time. And there was a guy who helped me run for money because I wasn't raising a whole lot of money. And he wanted literally me to go to a couple of drug dealers and ask for cash. And he was just like, Frida, we'll come to this meeting and we're gonna meet with these drug dealers. And they're gonna put literally a bag of money. Don't touch the money. I'm gonna grab the money and take it away. I'm like, no, that's not me. I'd rather lose. Like, A is against campaign finance laws. I am not going to jail. I don't need money that bad. Like if I lose, I lose. And so some of this, some of the countries, I think was Cambodia is one of the most corrupt countries in the world. I forget which country it was. That's in here. Like you're going to run into that. And it goes back to, doing the hard work and being persistent and building that following one person at a time, because that depth will go longer. Like when I came back, I left politics and came back for a little bit. Like people who I met 20 years ago, like, oh, Frida, like, oh, I'm back, you're going to politics. Like, and we haven't talked literally from 10 years, but it's that one-on-one conversation that I had 10 years ago and spending time to develop that relationship ended up giving me more strength and more power in the long run, because people saw me when I was working hard, that they knew when I became a leader and had this vision of power that I wouldn't abandon them because I showed my proof to it. Compared to that drug dealer who's probably jail or dead by now, I have no idea. I never actually took the meeting, so I don't know what happened to them. But it's one of those things, like that person who was there, he died and moved on. So it's just like, I don't know what happened, but it's just one of those things. But the people that I spent the time with end up coming back 10 years later and were like, oh, Frida, you should run for this office, or you should support this, or I need to do that. So yes, there's been times, and it was tempting. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, like to say this so I can have that much, because I was getting, the person ahead of me had raised a lot of money. Her mother, I was running against another woman, her mother was an elected official, so they had a machine and they were having big events and parties, and I was just kind of just chugging around going door to door. It was tempting because, in politics, you always can use more money. But it was just like, at the end of the day, it was just like, I want to be able to sleep at night. So yes, but the ability to say no gave me a longer latitude, and I ended up getting more respect from people in my loss than actually winning.
So Makara is interested, if some of our scholars are interested in the political field, what are effective ways to prepare for that while in college?
Start campaigning, start volunteering for campaigns. That's how I started. That's how most people start, literally just volunteering and just being involved, like going back, showing up. A lot of times in politics is who shows up and who shows up all the time. And then one thing you'll start making phone calls, start going door to door. And if you show up on a consistent basis, and they'll be like, hey, you kid, you free, sometimes they'll know who you are, sometimes they don't. Depending on the campaign manager. Mostly the men won't remember your name, mostly the women will. And those like, you show up, you go help me in this event for me. And they'll start giving you more and more responsibility. So going to go, or either showing up as an internship, whether it's at your congressman's office or your state rep's office or your city council office, ask for internships, and tell them you want to have a career in politics, and ask for opportunities, because we always need help doing something. There's always work to be done in politics, and we're always looking for people just to step up. So if you just step up and put it and just constantly show up, your responsibility. And next thing you know, literally within a year, you literally may be running somebody's campaign because you show that you're reliable. But my thing is to start as a simple internship or volunteership and show like, hey, I'm here to show up, and keep showing up and working hard, and people are going to gravitate towards that, and they will push you forward, because we always need more people in politics. People don't, it's kind of counterintuitive, particularly where we see politics at, but on a day-to-day level, there's never enough people to do the work for politics.
And I would imagine that those skills are pretty transferable, because our scholars are all going to be going back home to their home country after college. So getting the experience here and then being able to go home and bring that experience with them.
Yeah.
So you talk a lot about showing up, and you just have to make a name for yourself. You got to be there. Every time somebody turns around, you have to be there. Mood's curious how you balance enjoying your college experience, enjoying your youth, with maintaining your goals.
It goes back to the boundaries part. Is like, when do you show up? So you might pick a time of like this every Thursday, like 2 or 3 days a week, will be my day to show up. And then that Friday, Saturday, the weekend you can have and relax and just be a young person, just enjoying the world. So that goes back to setting the boundaries. So set the times you want to show up and use that time to show up, because enjoy this time. I mean, one of the things when I worked in that .com company that I was talking about earlier, My boss said, do it while you're young and broke. Initially, I was offended because it's like, what did he mean by that? And I realized you don't have any responsibilities. You don't have kids. You're not married. You don't have anything tying you down. So go out and explore and try new things because you're used to being survival mode. So for me, it's like, as long as I had enough money for a sandwich and a bottle of water, I'm good, you know? So it's one of those things of take advantage of this time of not being burdened down by responsibilities that you will naturally have as a woman, and just figure out what days of the week you want to show up for the internship or for that volunteer thing. And then also have the opportunity to explore new activities that you have so you can take it back with you. Because one of the things, like even in politics, you learn how to create something out of nothing, with literally like internet connection, a laptop, and a phone. You can do basically anything in politics. So learn teaches how to be entrepreneurial, that most people in politics can transfer to the business world very well because we understand what it takes to grind out something and being persistent, where people usually don't translate to politics different because it's a lot of intense work. And so it's one of those things that you can always transfer into something about being very entrepreneurial.
Absolutely. I think this is going to be the last question for this session. Dion's curious about a time that you might have felt discouraged during your career and how you got yourself back on your feet.
Ooh. I think that time I was working in union politics, we took some very big hits. You know, I thought we laid off, I mean, our custodians, we had laid off 700 custodians who were mostly Black and brown people. And that was a big hit. And then we lost our union recognition, where they wouldn't recognize the union to be able to negotiate. And the union I worked for, the average worker made about like $30,000 a year. And these are people with families. And so they were very working class, been in poverty, and they were losing great jobs that provided great benefits. And a lot of them still work a second job, even though they were having a good government job. And we took some big hits that I felt like I personally let down our union members because we weren't able to save their jobs, and they were going to get laid off, and they're going to have to take a job that's less than. And I remember that we have to put our own people in. And that's when I start really looking at how do I put people that have our own values and make them, either have them run, and it goes back to being opposed and beating them. Our goal is to beat the incumbent, but also our goal is to change the conversation of saying this is not right. And seeing that happen, and then seeing people come back to me is like, yeah, Frida, like I don't talk about this, but I grew up poor, or I was a custodian and before I became a doctor or a lawyer, or you realize like people's connections that they're embarrassed to say in public, they will tell you that, oh, okay, I am doing the right thing. It didn't feel like in the moment because some big losses and some people's lives were permanently changed. And I remember at one point, like I was like talking to my boss, and she was a female boss, thank God, and a good friend of mine. And I was crying, and I was just like, it's all on me again. And she's like, Frida, that's not fair. You're part of a movement, and every movement has its valleys and has its lows. But you hit a certain low, there's nothing you do but go up. And so it's like you just have to put one foot forward, and it's hard sometimes. Like you're going to go with tears and heartache and pain, and then you have that one success. And like at one point, because like I'm fighting because I have nothing else to lose. At what point were you going to take away? Like you already like took people's jobs away. People are hurting. So I'm at least going to go back and push back because it's the right thing to do. And then the next thing you know, it's just like, oh no, Frida, you're right. We should raise the minimum wage. These people deserve to make $15 an hour. And then you see them get one raise, and you see them get another raise, and you see the steps. And the next thing you know is a year later, and you look like, oh, I dramatically improved someone's life by giving them an extra $2 or $3 per hour, which then helped them stop working a second job and spend more time with their family. But it took a second. Like you had to sit back and reevaluate what's going on. But it's a matter of like, I'm here for, and goes back, going for the long game. Like, and the people who outsources people, like you're only gonna be in office for so long because you're term limited, or and be a little bit morbid, like I said, but you're going to die off. Like we're all humans, we're here for a certain time, and who's going to replace you? And we need to create that new generation to replace you. And so it's kind of keeping that, like being ready for that moment and the opportunity to step up when that person either is term limited and you put somebody in, or unfortunately they retire, or move out of office. And that was one of the things that I learned, is just like an opportunity is going to come, you have to wait. And the waiting is the hard part. I'm not going to lie. It's hard sometimes because you got to sit down and kind of wait it out, but it happens and it works.